The first thing I noticed about Gingerbread Town was the smell. It wasn't sweet the way I expected, not warm sugar or melted chocolate. It was faint, distant, like memory rather than scent, as if the air itself was remembering something it used to be. I arrived just before dusk, when the sky softened into pale amber and the world seemed undecided about becoming night. The road that led me there was narrow and quiet, curling through snow-dusted pines that stood unnaturally still. No wind, no birds. Even my footsteps felt muted, as if the ground had learned how to listen without responding. A wooden sign leaned near the entrance of the town. The paint had peeled away, leaving behind a faint outline of letters that once proudly read, "Welcome to Gingerbread Town." Someone had carved a second line beneath it, much later, much rougher. "Stay a while." I don't know why I didn't turn back. The houses were small and close together, shaped like something imagined rather than built. Roofs curved too gently. Windows glowed with a soft, candlelit warmth that felt practiced, deliberate. Every structure looked edible at first glance. Walls the color of baked dough, trims like spun sugar, chimneys dusted with something resembling powdered snow. But the longer I looked, the less convincing it became. The textures were wrong, too solid, too old. I reached out and touched the wall of the nearest house. It was cold, hard as stone. Whatever sweetness this town once promised had long since hardened into something else. A bell chimed somewhere deeper in the streets, slow, measured, like it was marking time rather than calling attention. That was when I realized how quiet it was. No voices, no laughter, no signs of life beyond the glowing windows. Curtains were drawn tight, as if the town were collectively holding its breath. I stood alone in the center of the road, snow crunching faintly beneath my boots, feeling like I had arrived late to something important, or early. I told myself there had to be an explanation, a winter festival, a closed attraction, a place preserved for tourists who never came anymore. But even those ideas felt thin, unable to support the weight of the silence pressing down around me. I walked deeper into the town. Every street curved back on itself in subtle ways, gentle enough that I didn't notice at first. The same bakery appeared twice, then a third time. Each time the display window was identical. Gingerbread figures frozen mid-smile, eyes made of dark candy, all facing outward, watching. I passed a town square with a large tree at its center. It was decorated for Christmas, though the ornaments were faded and dull, their colors softened by years of cold. Beneath the tree were neatly wrapped presents, stacked with care. None of them had names. The bell chimed again, closer now. A strange feeling settled into my chest, not fear exactly, but recognition, the unsettling sense that the town knew me, even if I didn't yet understand why. As the sky darkened and the lights in the windows grew brighter, I felt a quiet certainty take shape in my mind. Gingerbread Town was not abandoned. It was waiting. Every street curved back on itself in subtle ways, gentle enough that I didn't notice at first. The same bakery appeared twice, then a third time. Each time the display window was identical. Gingerbread figures frozen mid-smile, eyes made of dark candy, all facing outward, watching. I passed a town square with a large tree at its center. It was decorated for Christmas, though the ornaments were faded and dull, their colors softened by years of cold. Beneath the tree were neatly wrapped presents, stacked with care. None of them had names. The bell chimed again, closer now. A strange feeling settled into my chest, not fear exactly, but recognition, the unsettling sense that the town knew me, even if I didn't yet understand why. As the sky darkened and the lights in the windows grew brighter, I felt a quiet certainty take shape in my mind. Gingerbread Town was not abandoned. It was waiting.
By morning, the village looked almost harmless. Sunlight softened the sharp angles of the gingerbread roofs, and the icing along the windows glittered as if it were fresh snow. Children's laughter echoed somewhere near the square, light and distant, like it belonged to another place entirely. If I hadn't tasted the air the night before, sweet, burnt, and faintly bitter, I might have believed Gingerbread Town was nothing more than a holiday illusion. I stepped outside the small cottage I had been given, my boots pressing into streets that looked dusted with sugar but felt oddly firm beneath my weight. The ground was warm, not from sunlight. This warmth came from deeper below, as if the town itself was slowly breathing. People greeted me as I walked. They smiled too quickly, held eye contact a moment too long. Their clothes were stitched in cheerful reds and greens, but every thread looked carefully repaired, mended again and again over time. Nothing here was new. Everything had been preserved. At the center of town stood a clock tower made entirely of biscuit and caramelized sugar. Its hands were frozen at the same time, 12 minutes past 6. No one seemed to notice. Or perhaps everyone had noticed long ago and decided not to ask why. A woman arranging sugared fruit at a stall caught me staring. "It hasn't moved since before I was born," she said, gently, without looking up. "Time doesn't hurry here." Her voice carried no fear, just acceptance. I asked her how long she had lived in Gingerbread Town. She paused, then smiled again, long enough to stop counting. As I walked away, I realized something unsettling. There were no paths leading out. Roads curved back into themselves, alleys folded into courtyards. No matter how far I walked, the scent of cinnamon and smoke never faded. Above it all, faint but persistent, I heard it again. The sound I'd noticed in the night, a low, rhythmic crackle, like a fire kept carefully under control, like something being baked very slowly. The gingerbread town revealed itself slowly as I walked deeper, as if it were deciding whether I was allowed to see it at all. Houses leaned toward one another like they shared secrets, their walls made of layered biscuits pressed with careful patterns. Windows were panes of melted sugar, cloudy and uneven, glowing softly from a light I couldn't identify. There was no sun in the sky anymore, just a pale winter blue brightness that felt suspended, as though time had paused to watch me.
I passed a small bakery at the corner of a street dusted with powdered sugar that looked like snow. Inside, trays of bread sat cooling, steam rising in gentle curls, but there was no baker, no footsteps, no voices, only the faint creak of signs swaying in a breeze that smelled of cloves and pine. The warmth from the ovens brushed my face, comforting and unsettling at the same time, like a memory that didn't belong to me. Everywhere I looked, the town felt prepared for people who never arrived. Chairs were pulled out at tables, mugs sat half-filled with dark cocoa. A scarf hung from a railing, its knitted threads stiff as if frozen mid-motion. I reached out and touched it. It was warm, not warm like something near a fire, but warm like skin. A soft crunch echoed behind me. I turned, heart tightening, but the street was empty. Still, the sound came again. Slow, deliberate footsteps, as if someone were walking carefully, trying not to break the sugared ground. I followed the sound toward the town square, where a tall clock tower rose, built entirely of stacked wafers and caramel beams. Its clock face was iced in white, the hands frozen at a time that felt important, though I couldn't say why. Beneath the tower stood a fountain. Instead of water, thick honey flowed endlessly from its center, pooling and returning in a loop that made no sense. As I watched, my reflection wavered on its surface. For a moment, I thought I saw myself smiling. I wasn't. That was when I noticed the figures. They stood at the edges of the square, half hidden between buildings. Gingerbread people, at least that was what my mind called them at first. They were shaped like people, yes, but taller, thinner, their edges too sharp. Their icing eyes reflected the light, following me as I moved. None of them stepped forward. None of them spoke. I felt something settle in my chest then, not fear, recognition. Somehow, impossibly, I knew this town had been waiting for me. The fourth morning in Gingerbread Town arrived without sound. No bells rang, no ovens hummed, no sugar chimneys breathed out warm, spiced smoke. The town simply existed, perfect, still, as if someone had pressed pause on a music box mid-note. I stepped outside my peppermint house and noticed something that made my chest tighten. There were no footprints, not mine, not anyone's. The powdered sugar streets were smooth, untouched, stretching in neat curves between candy cottages and frosting-covered lampposts. It was as if I hadn't walked here at all, as if the town had reset itself overnight. I turned slowly, scanning the windows. Every curtain was open now. Last night, many had been drawn shut. I remembered that clearly. But this morning, every single house stared back at me with dark, empty eyes made of glass sugar and spun caramel frames. I felt watched. "Hello?" I called, my voice sounding too loud in the silence. No answer. I walked toward the square, my steps cautious. The giant gingerbread clock tower still stood at the center, its candy cane hands frozen at the same impossible time.
but something new clung to its base. Crumbs. A trail of them leading away from the tower and down a narrow alley I hadn't noticed before. The alley was tight, the walls on either side made of layered biscuit bricks pressed close together, as if the town didn't want anyone lingering there. The air smelled stronger here, burnt sugar, dark molasses, something almost bitter beneath the sweetness. At the end of the alley stood a door. It wasn't candy, it was wood.
Old, cracked wood, splintered and dull, completely out of place in a town built from sugar and spice. No frosting trimmed its edges, no decoration softened it, just a plain door set into a wall of gingerbread like a scar. I stared at it for a long time before touching the handle. It was cold. That alone felt wrong. When I pushed the door open, it didn't creak, it sighed. Inside was a small room, bare except for a single table and a chair. The walls here weren't sweet or colorful, they were gray, ash-colored, as if the joy had been burned out of them long ago. On the table lay a book. Its cover was dusted with flour and soot, the title pressed deep into the leather. Residence. I opened it. The pages were filled with names.
Hundreds of them, each written in careful, looping handwriting, each followed by a short note. Stayed too long, asked too many questions, wouldn't wake up. My breath caught when I reached the last page. The ink there was still wet. My name was written at the top. Beneath it, someone had added a single unfinished line, learning to belong. I slammed the book shut. The room felt smaller now, the air thicker. Somewhere beyond the walls, I heard it again, the softest hum, low and slow, like a lullaby sung through clenched teeth. The town was awake, and I was no longer sure it wanted me to leave.
The town revealed itself slowly as dawn crept in, though dawn felt like the wrong word here. The sky lightened without the sun ever truly appearing, as if the world had agreed to soften rather than wake. Gingerbread roofs glistened with a thin sheen of melted sugar, and the streets smelled faintly of cinnamon and something older, something burned. I began to notice the people. They were not made of gingerbread like the houses. They looked human, wrapped in thick coats, scarves dusted with powdered sugar, but there was a stiffness to them, a carefulness in the way they moved. Each step was deliberate, each smile was held just a second too long. A woman stood outside a shop window, arranging pastries that never seemed to change shape. She glanced up when I passed, her eyes kind but distant, as if she were looking through me rather than at me.
"Are you new?" she asked softly. Her voice carried the warmth of a fireplace, yet it echoed strangely, like sound traveling through an empty hall. "I think so," I replied. "I don't remember how I got here." She nodded, unsurprised. Most people don't. Inside the shop, clocks lined the walls, dozens of them, all decorated with icing and gold trim. None of them moved. Their hands were frozen at different hours, some pointing to midnight, others to moments just before morning. "Does time work here?" I asked. The woman smiled again, slower this time. "It works differently. Here, we rest inside it."
As I stepped back into the street, her words followed me, settling somewhere deep and uneasy. Rest inside it. Further down the road, a group of children played quietly in the snow, rolling balls of powdered sugar and laughing without sound. Their shadows stretched oddly across the ground, long and thin, pointing not away from the light, but toward it. I realized then that nothing here was accidental. The sweetness, the stillness, the gentle calm, it was all carefully constructed, layered like frosting over something fragile. And beneath it all, I could feel a question forming, slow and persistent, like a heartbeat. Why did this town exist at all?
By the time I reached the edge of the town square again, the light had changed. It was not brighter, not darker either. It was steadier. The flickering warmth that once made the gingerbread houses look soft and welcoming had settled into something more constant, like a held breath that never quite released. Snow still fell, but slower now, each flake drifting as if it had time to think before landing. The clock tower chimed once, just once, and every sound stopped with it. No bells afterward, no wind through sugar glass windows, no crackle from candy cane lampposts, only my breathing. I realized then that the town was listening to me, not in a threatening way, not like a predator waiting to strike, more like a room full of people who had all paused mid-conversation because someone had finally arrived. I took a careful step forward. The ground beneath my boots felt different, less brittle, more solid, almost warm. When I looked down, I saw faint footprints glowing behind me, each one slowly fading, as if the town did not want to remember where I had come from. Ahead, at the center of the square, something new had appeared. A long wooden table. It had not been there before. The table was carved from dark wood, polished smooth, its surface dusted lightly with powdered sugar like fresh snow. Along its length sat plates, cups, and small wrapped parcels, neatly arranged, symmetrical, patient. At the far end of the table stood a single chair, empty. I did not sit. Instead, I walked slowly around the table, drawn to the parcels. Each was wrapped in paper the color of cinnamon bark and tied with thin silver thread. No names, no tags. Yet somehow I knew they were meant for someone, for me. I reached out, but stopped just short of touching one. A quiet thought crossed my mind, soft, uninvited. What happens if you accept a gift from a place that doesn't want you to leave? The air shifted, as if the town had heard that question too. From somewhere behind me came a sound I had not heard before. Footsteps. Slow, measured, unhurried. I turned. A figure was walking toward the table from the far side of the square. At first, they looked like one of the gingerbread people I had seen earlier. Tall, slender, their outline edged with white icing. But as they came closer, the details softened. The icing faded into pale fabric, the gingerbread texture smoothed into something more human. They stopped a few steps away from me. We stood there, facing each other, the long table between us. Their face was calm, not smiling, not stern, just aware. "You found the center," they said gently. Their voice was not loud, yet it carried without echo. It felt like it had always been part of the town, the way the warmth and the snow were. "I didn't mean to," I replied. They nodded, as if that answer made sense. No one ever does. They gestured toward the chair at the end of the table. "This is where people decide," they said. "Decide what?" I asked. Their eyes lowered briefly, then met mine again. "Whether they are visitors," they said, "or ingredients." The words settled heavily between us, not sharp, not frightening, but unmistakably final. I swallowed. "And the gifts?" I asked, glancing at the parcels. "They help you forget the question," the figure replied softly. For the first time since entering the town, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear exactly, recognition. I thought of the sweetness everywhere, the comfort, the warmth that never demanded effort. I thought of how easy it would be to sit, to unwrap, to stay. "What happens to the town?" I asked slowly, "if no one chooses to leave?" The figure's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. The calm thinned. "The town becomes perfect," they said, "and perfection is very quiet." Silence returned, deeper than before. The clock tower did not move. The snow seemed to pause mid-air. I looked at the empty chair again, then at my fading footprints behind me. "I don't want to forget," I said. The figure studied me for a long moment. Then, with a small, almost sad nod, they stepped back. "Then you should not sit," they said. As they retreated, the parcels on the table began to glow faintly, inviting, patient, persistent. I took a step away from the table. The warmth dimmed, the town exhaled, and somewhere far beyond the square I heard something new, a sound I had not heard since arriving. Wind. Snow began to fall again, slow and deliberate, each flake drifting like it had somewhere important to be. Elian watched from the edge of the square as the Gingerbread Town settled into a quieter rhythm. The lanterns dimmed slightly, their glow warmer now, less theatrical. Somewhere far away, a bell rang, not sharp like before, but soft, almost tired. He noticed then that the townspeople were no longer watching him. Instead, they were preparing. Doors were being gently closed, windows were being shuttered with care. Long tables were cleared, crumbs brushed away, plates stacked neatly, as if this was the end of a long day rather than the beginning of something unknown. Children were guided indoors, their laughter subdued into whispers. A woman passed Elian carrying a basket of broken gingerbread pieces. She paused, finally meeting his eyes. There was no accusation there, only a quiet understanding. "It's nearly time," she said, voice low.
You should decide where you belong before the town does it for you." Before he could ask what she meant, she was gone. Elian felt it then, the subtle shift beneath his feet. The cobblestones pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat slowing. The air grew heavier, sweeter, almost cloying. The scent of ginger and sugar deepened into something darker, something burnt. He walked toward the clock tower, drawn by the sense that whatever truth remained was waiting there.
The tower door, once sealed tight with icing and candy glass, now stood ajar. Inside, the stairs spiraled upward, carved not of stone, but layered biscuit and dark bread, worn smooth by time and footsteps. With each step, memories flickered at the edge of his mind. Hands baking dough, laughter in a warm kitchen, a child pressing cookie cutters into soft gingerbread. Memories that were not his. At the top of the tower, he found the clock face from the inside. Its gears were made of caramel and brass, slowly turning, dripping faintly as if melting. In the center hung a small bell, cracked and darkened, and beneath it stood the baker. Up close, the figure was less imposing. The flour-dusted apron was stained, the edges frayed. The baker's face was tired, lined with something deeper than age.
"You came back," the baker said, not surprised. "You said the town needed me," Elian replied, "but you never said why." The baker nodded slowly. "Because this town was made from longing, from comfort remembered too vividly, and longing always asks for a keeper." The gears groaned softly. "Every winter," the baker continued, "someone finds their way here. Someone who remembers warmth too clearly. Someone who doesn't quite belong where they came from anymore." Elian felt a tightening in his chest. Images surfaced, his own world, gray streets, quiet rooms, holidays that felt hollow rather than cruel. "What happens to them?" he asked. The baker looked toward the bell. "They stay, or they leave something of themselves behind." Outside, the snow thickened, blanketing the town in white. The lights dimmed further, settling into a hush. The bell above them began to sway just slightly. Time, it seemed, was almost up.
By the 8th morning, Gingerbread Town no longer pretended to be harmless. Snow fell again, but this time it carried a faint scent, burnt sugar and old smoke. Elias noticed it as he walked past the peppermint lampposts, their red and white stripes now dulled, as if the color had been washed away by years rather than days. The bells above the bakery door rang softly behind him, though he had not touched them. The town was watching. He felt it in the way the windows reflected him a second too late, in the way footsteps echoed when he stopped walking, in the way the gingerbread children no longer waved, but stared, still smiling, still sweet, their sugar glass eyes catching the light like frozen tears.
Elias reached the square and saw that the clock tower had changed. The candy-caned hands were gone. In their place were two thin, dark sticks like charred matchwood. They pointed not to numbers, but to words etched into the frosting face of the clock. Remember. The bell rang once, low, heavy. A memory pressed into Elias's chest without warning. He was older, tired, sitting at a kitchen table far from this town. Snow outside a real window. No sweetness in the air, only silence. Across from him sat an empty chair, one he had set every year without knowing why. His hands trembled as the memory faded. "That isn't mine," he whispered, though he no longer believed it.
The baker emerged from the shadows beneath the tower. His apron was darker now, stained not with flour, but with something like ash. He no longer smiled. "You're getting close," the baker said gently. "The town can feel it." "Close to what?" Elias asked. The baker looked up at the clock. "To waking." A sound drifted through the square then, soft at first, like wind through hollow halls. It was singing, not cheerful, not sad, just familiar. A lullaby Elias could not remember learning, yet knew every note of. The gingerbread houses leaned inward, their candy roofs cracking slightly as if straining to listen. Sugar flaked from their edges like falling snow. "Why does it hurt now?" Elias asked. "Because sweetness can only hide bitterness for so long," the baker replied. "This town was made to soften something sharp." The singing grew clearer, pulling at Elias's thoughts. Images flickered behind his eyes, a firelight glow, a promise broken gently, a choice made too late. Each memory felt coated in sugar, but beneath it, burnt, brittle, aching. Elias took a step back. "I don't want to ruin this place," he said. The baker met his gaze. "You already did," he said kindly, "the moment you started remembering." A crack split the ground beneath the clock tower. Not loud, just enough to notice. Dark space showed beneath, endless and quiet, like the inside of an unlit oven. The bell did not ring again. Instead, the town breathed in, slow, collective, and waited for Elias to decide whether he would keep dreaming or finally taste what had been hidden all along. By the time I realized Gingerbread Town was no longer pretending to be harmless, the snow had stopped falling. The silence felt deliberate. I stood at the edge of the central square, where the candy cane clock tower leaned slightly, as if tired of keeping time. The buildings around me glowed softly from within, warm amber light behind sugar glass windows, but there were no shadows moving inside anymore. No laughter, no footsteps, no quiet hum of a town preparing for sleep, just stillness. I had eaten nothing since arriving, yet I felt full, too full. My chest carried a strange warmth, like something settling into place that had never belonged there before. When I looked down at my hands, I noticed the faintest change. My skin held a subtle matte sheen, not quite human, not quite confection, as if I were slowly being rewritten. That was when I understood. Gingerbread Town didn't trap visitors by force. It waited for them to soften. Memories surfaced without warning, small ones at first. Baking with my mother, pressing cookie cutters into dough, waiting by the oven door, impatient, hopeful. I realized the town was feeding on that nostalgia, weaving it into its streets and walls, shaping itself from longing rather than flour and sugar. "You stayed," a voice said gently. I turned. The baker stood beside the fountain now, her apron dusted with powdered sugar that never fell. Her smile was kind, almost apologetic. "Most don't notice until it's nearly done," she continued. "They think it's comfort they feel, belonging." "What happens to them?" I asked. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she gestured toward the houses. I looked again, and this time I saw it. The curves of door frames echoed shoulders, window shutters bent like folded arms. The town wasn't built, it was grown, slowly, patiently, from people who chose to stay. "I can still leave," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "Yes," she agreed, "you can." Her pause stretched longer than necessary. "But you won't leave unchanged." The clock tower chimed once, soft, muffled, like sound passing through dough. With each echo, I felt something loosen inside me, as if the town were gently untying knots I hadn't known I carried. For the first time since arriving, I wondered whether escape was the right word, or whether Gingerbread Town was simply offering rest, permanent, sweet, and quiet. I stepped back toward the road I had entered from. The snow there looked darker now, less inviting. Behind me, the town breathed, slow, steady, patient. And somewhere deep beneath the sugar and spice, I felt it waiting to see what I would choose. The town looked almost kind in the end. That was what unsettled me most. Morning, or something like it, rested softly over Gingerbread Town. The sky was a pale wash of cream and rose, as if dawn had been stirred gently into milk. The houses no longer leaned inward with watchful hunger. Their candy windows no longer glistened like unblinking eyes. Everything felt quieter, settled. I stood at the edge of the square where I had first arrived, my footprints pressed into sugar dust that no longer clung to my boots. The air smelled faintly of spice, but the sweetness had dulled, like a memory that had been repeated too many times. Behind me, the town breathed, not loudly, not urgently, just enough to be alive. I understood now why no one ever screamed here. Screaming required panic. Gingerbread Town did not feed on panic, it fed on belonging. I thought of the people I had seen, faces at windows, shadows in doorways, figures frozen mid-smile. They had not been taken by force. They had stayed, slowly, gently, one comfort at a time. Warmth, safety, familiar rituals, a place that never asked you to leave. I remembered my first night here, the fire that lit itself, the bed that fit my body perfectly, the way the walls seemed to lean closer, not threatening, just attentive, listening. I turned toward the tallest building at the center of the town, the old bakery with its cracked sugar brick walls and roof sagging under layers of hardened icing. That was where the truth lived, not hidden,
simply waiting for someone willing to stop pretending. Inside, the air was cooler, less sweet. The ovens were dark now, their mouths open and empty. On the far wall, beneath years of caramel drips and powdered sugar, was a mural I hadn't noticed before. It showed the town as it once was. Not candy, not confection. Wooden houses, stone paths, smoke rising from chimneys, ordinary people with ordinary faces. A small settlement built to survive winter, famine, loneliness. At the center of the mural stood a table. Around it, people holding hands, their mouths open in song or prayer. I couldn't tell which. Below the image, words were carved deep into the wall, not decorative, not sweetened. We wished for warmth. We wished to never hunger. We wished to never be alone. The mural changed as it stretched across the wall. Wood became sugar, stone became biscuit, faces smoothed into smiles too perfect to be real. And the final panel showed no people at all, only houses, waiting.
I felt it then, not fear, not urgency, but an invitation. Gingerbread Town did not trap you. It asked. It offered to soften the sharp edges of living, to replace uncertainty with routine, to trade growth for comfort, to let you rest forever inside something that would never change. I stepped back, my breath fogging slightly in the cool air. "I don't belong to you," I whispered. The town listened. The walls did not tremble. The floor did not crack. There was no anger in its silence, only disappointment. Outside, the path leading away from the square had appeared again, the same one I had arrived on. It was narrow, uneven, real, no sugarcoating, no gentle curve, just dirt and stone and distance. Leaving would not be dramatic.
That, too, was part of the town's design. Those who escaped did not run. They walked away quietly, carrying the weight of knowing how easy it would be to return. I took one last look back. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw movement at the windows. Not waving, not pleading, watching, learning my shape, my pace, my hesitation. As I stepped onto the path, the sweetness faded with every footfall. The air cooled. The sky darkened into something honest and uncertain. Behind me, Gingerbread Town settled into stillness, patient as ever. It did not vanish. It never does. Somewhere, on some quiet road, when the night is cold and the world feels unbearably sharp, a warm light will appear again, and the town will be ready, waiting for the next traveler who is tired enough to believe that comfort is the same thing as home.